Can everyone at home hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Yay! I think it's the first time I've ever done it all by myself. All right. I didn't even look at what we're teaching today. I think is it inspections and negotiations?
Yeah.
Great. One of my favorite classes, kind of fun. So when you end up under contract, if you are representing the buyer, you're going to be setting inspections and conducting them. If you're representing the seller, you'd still be part of those inspections. You want to be present. And the purpose of inspections is to investigate known problems or unknown and any unknown problems. Okay, known problems though, if it is something that has, a dollar amount, it's seen, or it's already addressed in the previous contract, you wouldn't necessarily be going after for a repair or a credit in relation to that if you've pre-negotiated it or the buyer has made their offer price reflecting that issue, right? There's a really big kind of jump between doing so, though that's not very common to do. And the reason for that is because even if we have a known issue with estimates, usually the seller has obtained these or a previous buyer. And as a buyer and buyer's agent, you really want independent inspection to verify numbers and condition, right? You can't necessarily assume that the information you're receiving is accurate, let alone honest. Okay, so that being said, another note is if you're a buyer's agent and you're going under contract on something that has previously been an escrow, if the previous buyer had conducted any inspections, the listing agent is legally required to give you a copy of those inspections. All right. So as a buyer's agent, we'll focus on mostly from the buyer's agent side, and then we'll follow up with the seller's agent side. We'll do a little in between. Yes.
I was gonna ask, isn't it seller's agent and listing agent?
Seller's agent is listing agent. Right? The seller is listing their home.
Yes.
There's selling agent. Selling agent is buyer. And thank you for bringing that up because I will try to stick to the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. I'll try to use that terminology. I come from escrow background, so selling agent is typically how we refer to buying agent. Seller's agent is listing agent, but I'll try to stick to just seller and buyer agent so that it's a little clearer. But selling agent can be referred to as a buyer's agent.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know it's very confusing. Seller's agent, selling agent, right? The selling agent reps the buyer. They're the ones who sold it. Ish. It's very confusing.
So I wasn't sure.
Yeah, of course. It was really hard for me too. And I still really try hard to not use that terminology because it's so confusing. So if you're the buyer's agent, you end up under contract. You're going to have most likely in this market, because it's a seller's market, it's very competitive for buyers, you're probably going to have short contingency periods, right? So everything that you do as a buyer's agent is going to be based upon these timeframes. So what's a typical buyer investigation contingency period, guys?
17 days.
I don't know who you're going under contract with, but there must be no competition.
I'd say 14.
7 to 14, 7 to 14. 7 if it's a condo is more likely, but it can be more or less. If it's less, you're gonna have a really hard time. If it's a single family, probably closer to 10 to 14. If you are selling, Jeff, if you're selling, estate homes, maybe it's closer to 17, stuff with grounds and outbuildings and things like that, unusual inspections, you might have a longer time frame for it. Now, if we see a market shift, buyer contingency timeframes will get longer, including the buyer investigation contingency. So inspections are what portion of the buyer investigation contingency? Go ahead, Gabby. Uh-oh.
Is it supposed to be a percentage?
No.
Oh, okay.
So if you ever take contract class with me, this is one of my big pet peeves in real estate is people refer to the buyer investigation contingency, which holds many different branches of, they refer to it as the physical, okay? Physical is a physical investigation, right? But the buyer investigation contingency is what's written into our contract. And that means review of HOA docs, that means review of prelim, a lot of different things. Yeah, it's broad. So when people say, physical inspection contingency 2B, and if they do this in a counter, technically, they left your investigation contingency alone and they only modified one branch of the investigation contingency, and you can use that against them in a huge way if you really needed to. It's not going to get you any favor with the other
So it was
agent.
inspection and then physical.
Yeah, investigation. And then physical is a branch of that. Okay. So because investigation is the main one, that's the time frame we work off, and this is the physical branch of it. So because these time frames are really tight, one of the very first things I do when I get a contract accepted, I open escrow, but the second thing I do is order inspections, because it can take me a while to get the inspections that I need. And not only that, if my what I call my core inspections, and we'll go into that in a second, if my core inspectors find anything, I might need what I call secondary inspections. So let's go over what core inspections are. I can leave this quiet. I moved the button in the wrong direction. Core inspections, well, general is the big one, general inspection. Okay, if there's a chimney, fireplace inspection. Sewer line, if it's a single family, you're not going to have a sewer line inspection on a condo. They don't have their own. Termite, these are core inspections. You might not always need a termite on a condo. Can anyone tell me why? Any ideas? Might be HOA responsibility. So what's the responsibility of the unit owner? And what's the responsibility of the HOA? Typically, the definition is walls in is unit owner, walls out is HOA. And I don't know about you, but I don't see many termite infestations in cabinetry. I usually see it in exterior of building, right? Because they're coming from outside. Now, that being said, there can be lumber or other materials that come into the home with termites. So I don't necessarily dissuade my condo buyers from having a termite inspection if they want one. And what's that?
What about like in between the walls? Like, is this like the inner wall?
In between the walls, it's HOA responsibility. Yeah. So those are what I call my core inspections. If the property is on a hillside, my a geological inspection is also a core inspection, and those are very pricey.
What about roof?
No, I'd call that a secondary inspection. So when my general inspector comes out, the question in the classroom was, what about the roof? When my general inspector comes out, he's going to crawl around under the house, on the roof, all around, check everything. And he's going to tell me, hey, Kristen, there's some problems on the roof up here. I recommend a roof inspection. And that's why I need my inspections ASAP, because I need time to find that roofer and get them scheduled. And, at this point, I'm usually at least a minimum of 2 to 3 days within my investigation contingency. And I might have as few as 4 left. Most of the time when a general inspector finds problems, though, the listing agents typically, as long as you're, communicative with them, usually willing to extend the investigation contingency a couple of days if necessary, because, they don't want to lose you. They want to give you the opportunity to take a look at it. So as a buyer's agent, should you be at inspections? Yes. Who else should be at inspections? Buyer. Who else? Listing agent. Anyone else? No, seller should not be there, ever. If you ever have a listing agent that puts you in that situation, I'm sorry for you. It's happened to me a couple of times in my career. It is very uncomfortable. A seller is going to have a very hard time with a professional whose job it is to go around and nitpick every imperfection in their home, right? This is the reason we don't have sellers there. Oftentimes, listing agents will fail to be there. This is bad for all parties. Why? If we find something, it is so important that everyone is aware of it, sees it, and that they feel the information is accurate. So there are a couple of different methods of negotiating inspections. I'll tell you which way I like. There's a couple of ways of doing it. Technically, when you receive inspection reports, you should be sending them to the listing agent right away. Okay. If you're the listing agent and the buyer is going to receive inspection reports and you don't receive them, you should be asking for them right away. And the reason for this is, as the seller's agent, if there's a huge problem, you need time yourself. Maybe you want to independently verify. Maybe you want to hire someone that you know and like, okay, to make sure this information is accurate before you try to convince your seller that, hey, it's a pretty big issue and any buyer is going to ask for this, repair or credit. So if I'm the buyer's agent and I'm at the property during inspections and there's a big problem and the seller's not there, I pick up the phone immediately. I try to do a video chat with them. I want them on the phone with the inspector. At a bare minimum, I'm taking video. Okay, if I can't reach them for some reason. And this is really important to me. Why? If I'm the buyer's agent, there's a big problem. I need the listing agent to believe the information that I'm giving them is accurate and that they trust what I'm saying and that what I'm asking for in relation to it is fair. Otherwise, what? I'm going to fail at my negotiations. Okay, so there is, there's this big school of thought with a lot of agents. They will tell you nothing. They'll hold all the inspection reports until like 5 p.m. on the day the investigation contingency expires. They'll slam you with this list of 30 items request for repair, hoping that you'll negotiate down half, or they'll trump up their numbers, hoping that you'll negotiate down from there and they'll get closer to what they want, right? It's a negotiation tactic. So I don't think that that's the best way. And there's a few reasons for that. Is number one, I have just given a laundry list of things that are unpleasant and unexpected to the other side, okay? So even if I'm giving them legitimate information, I haven't communicated this before, I am slamming the seller with a bunch of negative stuff that they're gonna respond negatively to, at least for a short term, right? A short period of time. So do you think my negotiation is going to be resolved quickly or easily? Probably not. I haven't done the groundwork. Right now, even if the seller is willing to grant my requests, they probably want to do some research and get some estimates and some second opinions before they're willing to just agree to anything that I'm asking for. Make sense? So I'll tell you the way I do it. I have very, very successful inspection negotiations, very successful. When there's a problem, I go to the listing agent right away and I work with them to resolve it. I tell them what the issue is. I tell them I'm going to get a specialist or a second opinion out. I throw out the names of the inspectors I'd like to work with. I ask them if they like or know any of them. Who do I want to select? I want to select someone they're going to receive as honest and impartial, whose information they're going to take is legitimate, because my only ambassador to the seller to get what my buyer wants, who is that? That's a listing agent. If the listing agent believes the information is accurate and true and fair, they're going to lean on the seller to, work with me on my requests. And, with buyers, I try to manage their expectations. I really try to manage buyer expectation is, in California, I'll tell you this right now. I've had 2 good chimney inspections in 20 years, 2 of them. And we're talking on new construction too. It's all fucked up. Okay. It's not built right. They don't need to know how to build them right. We don't really use them. I mean, technically they should be doing it right, but they're not. So most of the time, at least I do it, a lot of other agents do it too. They will advertise chimney fireplaces decorative only and disclose that, seller is not going to be providing any credits in relation to it, whether or not it's working, just to protect their seller sale price. I do it all the time. It's never an issue. Unless I know 100% that the fireplace and chimney are A-okay, it's decorative only in my listing. So as the buyer's agent, when I don't see this as part of the listing, and obviously if I've written an offer, I made sure my buyers were aware that the seller said that the fireplace is decorative only. I have the conversation with them before we do inspections. I want you to know the chimney and fireplace is going to be bad. And they're usually high ticket items, $10, $20, $30,000. I don't want you to expect that the seller is going to, give you a credit for $20,000, $30,000 in relation to this. There's a major safety hazard. If there's a structural hazard, then they'll probably work with us. Okay. If they've advertised it as decorative only, unless it's something that's structural and really unknown and affects the rest of the house, they're not going to work with us on it at all.
Question.
Yes.
Sorry. When you do get that second opinion, your inspector that are they asking you to pay for that? Like you're paying an inspection all over again, or you're paying a little bit of money to them for that info?
Pays for all inspections, and there is 100% an inspection fee, and every inspector is slightly different. Most of the time it is based upon what they have to inspect, how much of it, how many square feet, that sort of thing.
Okay, and then my second one is on the listing agreement, is it still the, not the, yeah, on the MLS sheet, if it's still the same, if the seller has put on there that there's an AC and you go and you look and before the offer and there is no AC, can we still, is it still required that they would have to install one because they said there was one? Kind of like the wood
No,
thing?
you're aware prior to having an offer accepted, right?
Pardon me?
You became aware prior to having an offer accepted, correct?
Yes.
It was visibly obvious to you that there was no AC, so therefore it's not reasonable to expect them to pay for an AC. Now, can you ask? Sure. Would they feel inclined or obligated? Probably not.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Welcome. So the other conversation I have with buyers is, so building code changes over time. Your inspector is going to point out a lot of things that are not currently up to code. Okay. That's normal. It's fine. It's called being grandfathered in. They will mention it, especially, you know, they know that the buyer has children and stuff like that. They'll talk about like railings, you know, spacing, stuff that might be of more concern to them. That's a good inspector. Okay. But buyers should not be asking for upgrades that, even though it's a safety concern, it's still considered an upgrade because it was built to code at the time. Okay. Anything that's offerable, you know, I've had a buyer insist, oh, I want a brand new HVAC system because the inspector said it's nearing the end of its life, but it's working perfectly. Sorry, that's an upgrade, not a repair. Okay. You're not buying new construction here. You know, on an occasion, if there's a bunch of little things and one kind of big thing like that, maybe we can try for it. It's kind of a give and take. And how do I gauge that? Well, you know, I try to manage my buyer's expectations, but I'm also kind of testing the listing agent along the way. Hey, you know, my buyer's really concerned about this issue. Have you talked to your sellers about what we found and the condition? Do you know, I definitely think we're going to be asking for that. Is that something that you think your sellers are on board to take care of for us? I'm doing a lot of verbal negotiation ahead of time. Okay. That slamming some unknown big laundry list thing, bad idea. Focus on what's important. Focus on safety issues. Focus on larger items. Okay. And pre-negotiate. Feel that seller out. Feel the listing agent out so that they can talk to their sellers. Also, when they break that news to the sellers, because they're going to, it gives the sellers a few days to digest before they actually see the request. Okay. Because everyone's initial reaction is going to be, ugh, right? Even if it's completely like legit, they're like, yeah, this is bad and we need to take care of it. Anyone's going to want it. Initially, they're going to be like, ugh, that's $15K out of my pocket. It hurts. So give it some time, pre-negotiate, lay the groundwork. So how do we make a request for repair, guys? What form do we use? Request for repair. Yeah, RR, request for repair. So a request for repair has the option of asking for things three ways. We can ask for the seller to repair. Okay. I don't necessarily like this way unless it's a minor thing or something that's a safety issue, like maybe a door's not locking or there's a broken window. Why? Because if we ask the seller to repair work, first off, we'd better be very specific about what scope of work we want done, who we want the work done by, because they can go hire some, you know, like person that stands outside of one of the hardware shops and have them go and do the repair and say, it's all done. Can you trust that it's done right? No, not necessarily. So I try to convince my buyers and or sellers, depending upon who I'm working with, that, you know, unless it's minor stuff or in relation to access and safety that needs to be taken care of so the buyer can actually move in when they close escrow, probably not the best idea to have repairs done. What's the second option? Credit. Okay, credits. So in order to ask for a credit and have it received well enough to have success obtaining one, you have to substantiate your numbers. So if I have an inspection on a roof and they, you know, don't give me an estimate, not all inspectors give estimates. And you should be a little wary of the ones that do. And that's not to be said for all trades. I mean, foundation, roof, I think you're all going to, the only time you're going to get an estimate is from the inspector that you're paying a fee to go out, because otherwise, you know, you're probably not going to be able to get it. But you need actual numbers in writing to provide to the seller from qualified individuals to make those estimates in order to be able to ask for a credit and the seller to say, okay, that's reasonable. And don't be surprised if the seller wants to try to split the difference, okay? So give honest numbers, do not inflate them. Use people that hopefully the listing agent, is open to, believing. Beware the buyer whose uncle is the contractor. You do not want them in for inspections. And they will try very hard. And 100% after we lift contingencies, if you want to bring your family members in to do stuff like that, go for it. But here's the deal. I don't care who your family member is. They have a vested interest in you, and they are not a professional inspector. And so no matter what your family member or friend finds, do you think that the listing agent and seller are going to take what they say seriously? No. So is that going to help you at all? Is it going to help you build trust? Is it going to help you achieve your goals? It's not. So we need to keep personal out of our business transaction. Okay. So we use request for repair. The last item I told you, repair credit, reduction to purchase price. Again, this is like a reverse credit. And I'll tell you why we would do one, the other, or combinations. And by the way, it's not 1, 2, or 3. It can be 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1, 2, and 3, it can be any combination thereof. So reduction of purchase price is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of asking for a credit, you're still substantiating the dollar amount you're asking for, and you're asking for it as a reduction of purchase price. This is going to reduce everyone's fees a little bit and your commission a tiny bit, but it's so tiny you don't need to worry about it. If you are worried about $20, you should not be representing anyone in a real estate transaction. So the reason we'd have a reduction of purchase price, other than maybe just a preference, and sellers don't necessarily like this, their neighbors will hate them. Why? Because it affects comps, which affects all of the neighbors' value. Is because a lender might be limiting the amount of the credit. So let's say there's a huge issue, a foundation issue, a mold issue. I just had a condo that had mold all over the place. And we negotiated and it was only like I don't even think it was a $500,000 condo. Maybe it was a little more. It's under 6. I can't remember. But a lender will limit, so if your buyer's buying with a loan, which most of them are, will limit the amount of credit a buyer can receive to what's called non-recurring closing costs. You don't need to remember what a non-recurring closing cost is. All you need to remember is, am I asking for a big credit? Because if I am, immediately I need to check with the buyer's lender before I get this paperwork signed off and say, hey, Miss or Mr. Lender, I'm going after a $20,000 credit on my little tiny purchase. What's the max credit I can really ask for? And they'll tell you, oh, maybe it's 10. So what did I do in this situation? I had something like a $15,000 credit. I can only use 7,500 of it for non-recurring closing costs, or for, as a credit. Let's take that advanced language out as a credit, but I still got the full credit amount. So what do? We took the other 7,500 or maybe 8,500 and we reduced the purchase price. So on our request for repair, it said seller to reduce purchase price to blah, 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 and seller to credit buyer through the close of escrow, blank dollar amount. Okay. And I had pre-negotiated this up front with the listing agent. So I knew that this was going to go through, and it got signed and it's all good. And here's the thing, when you do something like this, the request for repair, and you negotiate credits or reduction of purchase price, it affects the lender in a huge way. So the escrow officer and the lender have to have information in relation to this. However, you want to keep from them that there are problems with the property. Otherwise, they might not make the loan. So how do we do that? If you negotiate a credit or reduction of purchase price, you will draft an amendment of existing terms to your contract that just says the financial terms. Take it, you don't show the request for repair to escrow or the lender ever, 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 ever. You never mention these things to the lender. A mortgage broker's okay. You never mention these things to them. Okay. The word termite, it can be in your request for repair, but you better make sure no one outside of your office ever sees the word termite or ever sees your request for repair. What do sellers expect in return if they agree to any of your requests for repair?
Did you not reduce the purchase price?
Contingency removal. They want buyer investigation contingency removal. But here's the problem. You can't just necessarily lift that. You might be waiting for HOA docs that you don't have. Remember, I told you there's a lot of branches in the buyer investigation contingency and physical is just one. So they might erroneously send you over the acceptance saying, sure, as long as you lift this contingency with the contingency removal form. You need to check it. You need to make sure that I have every single one of these things. What happens if you don't have one of those things? You just draft contingency removal. I told you, it literally has branches off, like, you know, call, what's it called when you, an outline format, right? So if we have Roman numeral I and we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, G1, G2, it's like that. So I can go through and check the boxes individually within the investigation contingency on the contingency removal form and just lift the ones I'm supposed to. You should not be lifting everything under the investigation contingency unless you have everything. And HOA docs are the notoriously late ones. Okay. If you have those, can you lift it at that time? It is advantageous to lift as many contingencies as you safely can at that time. It is a feel-good moment. You gave us what we asked for. We're giving you everything we can in return. Let's move forward and get this done, right? Let's see. Now, in the case that it's not that simple, if you have a request for repair, the seller has the option of responding to that request for repair on the same form by either A, rejecting, B, accepting with following minor modifications, okay, accepting in its entirety, and they have one last option. They can ignore your request entirely. They are not obligated to respond to your request for repair. I've never had that happen. That's a real dick move, but they are not obligated to respond and they can still send you notice to perform. If they fail to respond and send you a notice to perform, it didn't go over well. It didn't go over well at all. So you're probably need to call the listing agent and start talking to them right away. Okay, so if the seller says, yeah, I'm gonna do some of this with some modifications, but it's not a small amount of modifications, there's only a small line on the request for repair, they're gonna respond with what here's my dad joke, call the form, RRRR. Seller reply and response to request for repair. It's a little too long to say, right? And why do I call it Because everyone feels by this point if we're getting to multiple rounds. And so just so you know, inspection requests, there can be multiple rounds of RR1, RRR1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're getting past 2, you are probably you're in dangerous territory of cancellation. The longer it goes on, the more contentious it becomes. This is why it's your job and so important to do that pre-negotiation with the listing agent and lay the groundwork out. Make sense? Okay. So on this RRRR, the seller can respond with much more detailed information of their counter offer. Okay, the buyer can either accept it, refuse it, and attach a brand new request for repair, which sometimes you do to clarify some stuff because this entire time you're background negotiating with the listing agent. Okay, they can accept with modification. And they can refuse to respond if they want, but I mean, it's not going anywhere. You may as well cancel your escrow if your buyer doesn't want to respond. Okay, so that makes sense. And again, no matter how many rounds it is, once you have an agreed upon solution, if there's any financial terms in it, what are we drafting to send to escrow and the lender? Amendment of existing terms, AEA.
I have a question.
AEA.
I have a question. Hi, Kristen. I know you said don't mention about the repairs. Don't ever tell them. They don't ask or they don't try to find out. They're just accepting the form. I mean,
they're not really supposed to, but I have had them ask me before, and I did not want to lie. So you know what I did? I acted fucking stupid. I said, I don't know. I'm driving around. That was true. I'm sure I didn't remember all of it. And I'm like, there's a whole bunch of little things. I don't know. We just wanted to get this done. I acted like a twit. And they took that response and I went on with my day and it was okay. Right? Can't lie, but I can certainly work it. Yes.
I think, did I understand it right? You mentioned like the mortgage broker and lender approach might be different.
Yeah, mortgage broker and lender are very different. The lender works for the bank. The bank is very concerned about things like this. Mortgage broker doesn't care. They know how to play ball. They know this is normal in every deal. They have relationships with us. They know our job better. A bank doesn't. A bank doesn't,
So
okay?
we can't explicitly talk everything with the mortgage broker.
You can tell anything to the mortgage broker you want.
Okay.
You cannot tell anything you want to the lender direct. And even if your mortgage broker is totally cool and you can tell them everything you want, if you send them documents, they're kind of in a bind. Do not send the mortgage broker documents unless they specifically demand them. Okay. To answer your question, Michelle, I just played dumb. You wiggle your way around it. It's like, darling, did you throw, have you seen my shorts? The shorts that I hate that he wears. I'm not sure where they're at. Have you looked for them? Meanwhile, a month ago, I threw them in the trash can.
I'm gonna be good at that then, thanks.
Good. I just started doing stuff like this. I didn't think it was right, but I recently realized it's really the only way to make a personal life work. Just to do what I want and ask, just do what I want. In any case, the number one reason that escrows cancel is inspections and negotiations. So you really want to set yourself up for success. Sometimes you're going to run into issues that are not necessarily solvable and are not easily quantified as to what it's going to take to fix them, or within a time frame that's going to allow for you guys to close your escrow on time. And I'll give you an example. So if there's something that's an HOA responsibility, right? Like there's a leak from the unit next door or up above that's making the property look ugly. Maybe it's fixed, but there's cosmetic damage, right? It might take the unit owner a while to get the HOA to take care of it. They're certainly not going to give the buyer a credit in relation to something the HOA is going to fix, right? So that's an easier example of something that's not necessarily solvable. I run into single families that have unfinalized permits from a previous owner, not even the seller I'm under contract with, okay, where we have to extend our escrow out and get stuff signed off. We want repairs, but we can't repair anything because until the city signs off on something, we can't alter it. It's a lot of trick work. The relationship you have with the listing agent is really paramount to the success of your inspection negotiation. Also, managing your client's expectations. You have to be able to say, I don't know on some things. So I'll give you an example, like the whole mold issue that I told you about in the condo I recently sold. Technically, it should be HOA responsibility, but there was stuff under the floor that wasn't. We had no way of knowing if the HOA would actually cover it. It was a really cheap, not well-funded HOA. We had no idea because we can't do what's called, I should talk to you about this too. We can't do what's called invasive inspection. We can't lift stuff up and go into the walls. We can't damage the property, right? And how can you really truly know what's going on between walls and under floors and all of that if you can't get to it? You can't. So I asked, and this is not the most accurate, but it's kind of fair. The seller wants to sell, the buyer wants to buy. I asked a couple of mold inspectors, not mold inspectors, we had mold inspection, mold mediation companies to go in and give me random estimates. So what they did was they said at a minimum, it's going to be $10,000 to $15,000. It could be more depending on what we find. I went to my buyer and I said, look, he's like, let's ask for 30. And I'm like, look, this is a little bitty, like $450,000, $500,000 condo. I think they're going to tell me to fuck myself. They're not going to do that. Why would they sell it at that point? They should, get rid of the, no, I'm not saying that on camera. They can mediate the issue and resell it. And not only that is I convinced the listing agent to go under contract with us after he'd been on the market for 2 days, right? They didn't wait for multiples. I was lucky they had kind of a lazy listing agent. Was really lucky. I like it when the listing agent's lazy.
How did you do that? How did you get them to go with you after 2 days?
I'm joking. I'm joking.
That's awesome.
I think it was a lazy agent. I wrote a really strong, clean offer. I didn't have to have a loan contingency. I was able to,
Way above or just next to?
no, it was actually at asking price.
There are many of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of lazy agents out there. And absentee sellers, it was a rental property for them. They were elderly, they didn't live there. I didn't know this until afterwards, but I'm telling you what I think led to all of that is probably a combination of all those factors. That's not my problem, right? All I do is represent the buyer, fair and honest transaction. I know. I teach a whole class on how to get your buyer offer accepted in multiples. There's a few versions of it on YouTube. And I talk about all of the different factors and things you can offer and the risks that it entails. So if you watch that class, you might pick up some tricks on it. I also talk about the psychology of how you talk to the listing agent when you're trying to convince them. It doesn't always work, but if you have those tricks, you can try it. Yeah. All right, what were we talking about? Okay, so I had the mold mediation companies come in. They said 10 to 15. My buyer asked for 30. I'm like, that's not going to happen. How can we ask for something more than someone's willing to put in writing for us? And he says, well, he said it could be more depending upon what he finds. And I said, but that's not a quantified number. So my buyer agreed. We'll ask for the 15. I went to the listing agent before I sent him the request to repair. I was like, look, bad news, but we have a number. I convinced my buyer that it wasn't really fair to ask you for more than we could substantiate with a company who put it in writing, but we're not going to take the low end. We want every penny of that 15. That's going to be our best and final, and please work with your seller on it because they're going to have to show these scary mold reports. My buyer, he happens to be a wastewater scientist. Like,
Is that true?
yeah, it is. It doesn't scare him. He will close this deal if you give him the full credit. Whereas how many times would you potentially fall out of escrow because mold scares people? It doesn't scare my client. We will close this deal. In fact, I will give you full contingency removal if you get this done for me. And he did, and I did, and we closed. So what's up? Thank you. Not the easiest buyer either. It's a repeat client. Engineers, scientists, doctors, attorneys, they're kind of difficult clients, but they're my specialty. Yay me.
Another question. So you had mentioned before, so let's say it was an escrow before and they had done all the inspections, and let's just say they found, let's say your agreement didn't work out, right? And so it fell out of escrow, but that seller then would have had to disclose that mold was found. So at that point, if you
Give you copies of my inspection reports.
right. So if you were the seller's agent at that point, knowing that the next buyer that comes in is going to ask for the same thing as the seller's agent, do you then fix all of those things ahead of time, or do you gamble that
Between you and the seller, that's really up to the seller, yeah, it's really up to the seller. I was gonna say, can we trust that the listing agent's going to give us for sure the inspection reports that they have?
no?
No.
No.
My team agent is under contract right now on a deal that fell out of escrow previously. We just happened to hire the same geology inspector that the previous buyer did, because there aren't that many geo inspectors out there. Who mentioned that David Trent, a drainage specialist, was also out there. So we had to say, hey, you want to give us those previous inspection reports? Shady, shady, shady. All right, let's talk about invasive inspection. So a buyer, when they hire inspectors, they are responsible for anything that happens in that home during the time of their inspection. Okay. Except if the seller has a pet that bites or injures a visiting guest. So if your seller has any kind of animals, even if they say they're nice, insist that they either take them or put them up someplace. Okay. We don't want to let the cat out. We don't want Susie's cat missing. She'll cry and mommy might not want to sell the house anymore. I don't know. I'd be pissed at you at a very minimum, and more focused on finding my cat than selling my house. So that's bad. And then the dog situation, 100%. I don't care how nice the dog is. Dog should be put away. You never know what people do or how they'll be received when they're in someone else's personal space, right? I've also had accidents happen. Okay, so I had an inspector crawling around on a roof and fell through the roof.
Oh.
Is the seller liable? No. Seller is not liable. the inspector has insurance policies for this. I have had inspectors break stuff, okay? Who's responsible? Buyer is responsible for repairing that right away, and it's not truly negotiable. If that happens, you tell your, as a buyer's agent, I just take care of it and then try to get the money back from the buyer. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this happened. Like we broke a toilet in some $10 million Hancock Park house. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Tell me who you want to have fix it. I'll call them or you can call them. And I have my checkbook here right now. You know, that's just what happens. I've had termite inspectors, they have these poker sticks and they'll show you like dry rot on eaves, the same house. I'm like, you showed us once that it's disintegrating. It's not closed. Stop poking it. It's like falling apart. I have been representing, I was doing dual representation on a deal, and the buyer was an agent from New York and was having every inspection under the sun. We were already pretty irritated by this, myself included, probably mostly myself included. She hired an HVAC inspector. The AC system was up in the attic. So the seller and I just, who was a very lovely woman, just chilled in the lower part of the house. You know, we didn't go up into the attic with him while he's doing his inspection. I start to hear all this banging and moving around and I'm like, excuse me, sir, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm taking the AC apart. And I was like, what? Get out, put it all back and get out of this house immediately. And I told my seller, please run your, it was raining and cold, an unusually cold day for LA. I'm like, please run your AC and your heat. I want to make sure everything's working because buyers, inspectors are not allowed to take anything apart to view it. They can take covers off, they can open things like that. They cannot dismantle things. They cannot open walls. So I had to call my buyer and let her know that this is what happened. And I had to ask the gentleman to leave. And, you know, she threw a little fit, but then she went and talked to, I think, her broker. Her broker was like, yeah, no, they're not allowed to do that. And we got through it, but no. If you have an inspector that's doing something like that, not only can the buyer be liable, you're going to piss the listing agent off, which what ultimately hurts your chances of successfully negotiating whatever request you have. The other thing, I was going to say, talking about invasive inspection. The most common thing that I see that I would call invasive inspection, and it could or could not become a big deal, is people, a lot of times they do what? They paint in preparation to sell their property. The painters will go and paint over the electrical panel if it's on the inside. And so if you open it, it's actually going to peel paint off the wall. If someone has a screwdriver or something, you can kind of cut around, you know, the door to open it. So it's not such a big deal. But in any circumstance, and I've never had someone say no, you should 100% have a listing agent call the seller and make sure that it's okay that the inspector opens that electrical panel, okay? Because it's probably going to cause some paint damage. So as long as they say yes, you're good. Sometimes if something is not available for inspection, okay? So let's say in this instance, the seller said, no, you cannot open that electrical panel. I don't think that would happen, but no, you can't do it. Okay, no problem, seller. You go ahead and make the electrical panel available for inspection. We will call our inspector back out. I'll let you know what his reinspection fee is. You can pay that and we'll come when it's ready for inspection. So similar with sewer line inspections. Sometimes there's a blockage where the sewer line inspector can't get their camera down into the sewer line very far. So it needs to be hydrojetted in order to just actually inspect it. Well, the seller will have to pay for that hydrojetting because they have to make it available for inspection. Their responsibility in inspections is to make it available for inspection. All right. So just know that there are inspection fees, reinspection fees that need to be negotiated. If the listing agent's trying to tell you that the buyer should split the cost of that hydrojetting with the seller, no way. No way. It's the seller's responsibility to make everything available for inspection. What if the seller's blocking access for inspection? They're not allowed to do that, right? The listing agent and seller are supposed to let you inspect anytime you want. So if they're not letting you, you need to say, okay, no problem. Let's extend our investigation contingency. You're blocking me for 4 or 5 days, so we'll extend it for 5 days. Right? No sweat off my back. Just make sure that that's part of the conversation. If you're ever not able to get your access, no problem. I just expect those days added to my investigation contingency. Anyone have any other questions about, yeah,
Maybe it's very similar to Crystal's question at the beginning, but when you have a fixer-upper, like not exactly fixer-upper, but it's a house and it's really old,
Mhm.
and your client is interested,
Mhm.
and the listing agent like immediately gives the pre-inspection report. He already tells everything about the house,
Mhm.
especially the roof problem and electrical panels needs to be changed.
yeah, if it's a total gut job, I'd
Yeah.
still inspect just to make sure there's nothing unexpected like foundation issues.
Mhm.
But I mean, you're not usually asking for any kind of credit or inspection or repair in those
Because they already
instances.
Explicitly.
Yeah,
Well, from
this
the
house, yeah, this house is not really helpable, right? This house is not really helpable. It's too much of an undertaking. So what do I do in that instance if I'm a listing agent and seller? Yeah, I might get a pre-inspection report, put it all out there, let everyone know the sale is as is, it's a total rehab, take it or leave it.
And what, as an agent, buyer's agent, would you feel stressed about the electrical panels? Because, I mean, from the report, it's obviously can spark anytime, you know? There can be a fire and anything.
So have the electricity turned off. Whose responsibility is it to maintain the home until escrow closes?
The seller.
So if it sparks and sets on fire and burns down to the ground, what happens?
It's theirs. They're responsible for it.
Buyer's gonna get their deposit back and move on.
After the escrow closing, if the buyer doesn't.
If there's an issue that's a safety hazard and escrow closes, the buyer needs to immediately rectify it because the seller is not gonna be liable for it. Everyone knew about it.
So you have to submit another form for that for your client, for a buyer?
No?
No, because he already read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're the listing agent and you're providing reports prior to entering contract or at the time you're making counter offers or accepting offers, there's a document called receipt for reports, and that's proof that you showed this report to the buyer's agent. Gave it to them so that the buyer could be aware of all of these things. Another quick tip, sometimes utilities are off and you show up for inspections. The inspectors can't inspect everything. Whose fault is that? Listing agent, seller. Who should be paying reinspection fees? Seller. Okay. So one of the things you want to do, especially if it's a vacant property, is you want to check with the listing agent to make sure all the utilities are on before you schedule those inspections, because you can circumvent having a problem and having extra fees. And if they're like, oh no, they're not on, but I'll get them on, it will be 4 days. What are you doing?
Extend.
That's right. You're going to extend your investigation contingency.
Kristen, what do you do to get the listing agent to show up to this inspection? A lot of times
If the listing agent's not showing up to the inspection, they're probably a lost cause. But I do ask always, I set up inspections for this day, this day, this day, or, sometimes I can't get them all on the same day. And times, will I see you there? Who will be providing access, that kind of thing. They generally, any decent agent will be there. And if they can't be, we'll say, oh, you're not gonna be there, is someone from your team going to be there? But at a bare minimum, like I said, I record the summary of the inspections from the inspectors. And I make sure that the other agent has them. Okay. This happened recently on my team. There was a listing agent who told my team agent, the buyer's agent, I don't want a copy of that inspection report. And he said, okay. And I was like, what? That's unethical. You needed to send it to him anyways, but you're still trying to work it out with them. So don't send it to him because it's going to hurt your negotiation. But the second we have an opportunity, if he ever asks a question about this inspection report, we're going to say, here, see attached, it's on page 6. That's how we're going to get around this. But you don't ask, nor do you grant a listing agent. You don't ask a listing agent if they want copies of the inspection report, nor do you tell them you're going to send it to them. You just send it to them. And this is to your advantage. Why? If they have it, they have to disclose to any other buyer, which strengthens your negotiation on your side as the buyer's agent.
Yeah. That inspection.
Mhm.
to-
So he was trying to preempt
Yeah.
He was so bad on the escrow, he wouldn't have to show it to the next potential buyer, is that what the channel?
Yeah, he was trying to avoid, it was bad inspections, really bad. And he wanted to avoid having to share that inspection report with the future buyer, which is illegal and unethical. But it kind of put my team agent in an unethical spot too. He is supposed to deliver it. He knows the intention of why the listing agent doesn't want it. So we bided our time, and we did. We sent over that inspection report the second he had a question about it. He started, my team agent started explaining the response, and I was like, no, tell him you got to go and you'll handle it later. And we'll just email it to him. So we have that ethical issue off of our plate that we created for ourselves over here.
Also another tip is just being communication, because there is a lack of communication in inspections. So
Yeah, a lot. Any other questions, guys?
How long does inspection take?
How long does an inspection take? It depends on the size of the property. And also the worse condition a property is, generally the longer the inspection takes. So if I have fast inspections, I'm generally expecting a good report. But they can last anywhere from about an hour and a half for a smaller condo. And we're talking about general inspection, everything else kind of quick. Termite, I think in general, take the longest, maybe geo too. Hour and a half to 4 hours or so. Now, if you're dealing with a huge estate home, sometimes it's not even on the same day that they get done.
And how long does it take for them, for inspector to prepare a report?
The report usually should be sent to you within 24 to 48 hours. It will have a table of contents, a summary. It should have some indication as to how severe the issues they're calling out are in photos. So I have an unrelated question in chat. I hate chat questions, guys. The question is, can the seller add square footage of an unattached garage to the square footage of a house? No worries. So that is a very difficult to answer question. It depends upon a lot of variables. And so unless I knew specifically the zoning, yeah, I can't answer that question at all. I'm sorry. If you want to call me a little bit later today, like after 4 o'clock, and discuss the specific property with me, I'd be happy to help you try to figure it out, but no problem.
it can be very tricky.
I have a question. Went to look at a house, tax assessor says 2-bedroom, 1 bath. That's what's on the MLS. We went and looked, and one of the bedrooms does not have a closet. What do you do then if it's saying it on the tax assessor? And there was no evidence. She said they didn't change the room around to make it where they moved the closet away. It just was no closet.
Might have been an error or some sort of exception at the time it was built. It's still legally a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. Should it have a closet? Yes. I would say because public record says it's a 2-bedroom, even though our legal definition of not having a closet, I would say you can still call it a 2-bedroom. But I would make sure that people know, just because you don't want to waste their time. And it is definitely a gray area.
And it will be usually in private remarks, but people don't read private remarks.
George, are you teaching class?
Yeah.
Oh, I represented the buyers, and it wasn't in the remarks. It's like 2-bedroom. We go there, there's no closet. The closet was made in the garage, taking up space in the garage, and made a walk-in closet by using half of the attached garage.
There could have been some modification they weren't aware of a long time ago. Who knows? I mean, it's a 2-bedroom. If public records, if the assessor says it's a 2-bedroom, legally, it's a 2-bedroom.
Okay.
But that really work for most buyers? Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would disclose it just because I don't want buyers to come in and agents come in and be pissed at me. Be like, yes, it's a 2-bedroom, but and it's legally a 2-bedroom, but for whatever reason, there's no closet in the 2nd bedroom. So, just make sure your buyer still wants to see it before setting the appointment with me or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Kristen, quick question. The receipt for report, does it have to be signed by the agent?
I think by the client.
Got it.
But you know how you can check? Go to Zip Forms and look up receipt for reports. And look at the signature lines.
Thank you.
Kristen, what about if you're representing a buyer and you buy a house that's new construction that's not finished yet? Say the buyer decides they're like, hey, it's closing or finished in 5 months. I want to buy it now. Anything that we need to be aware of in that situation?
Generally, we'll try to convince you that you don't need an inspection. That's not the case. Okay. They might try to convince you don't need a termite. That's not the case. Lumber can be infested. And with new construction, There's no request, there's no negotiation. Your request for repair should be 100% granted. It needs to be perfect. There is no negotiation in it. We were working on an all cash new construction deal, and I was like, yes, the easiest, right? No loan, no lender, fewer requirements, no appraisal, and new construction. So while we had it inspected, there's no, negotiation back and forth for repairs. It's just done.
Why no appraisal?
If you don't have a loan, you don't have to have an appraisal. But it was our client's choice. They can still have an independent appraisal if they like. And maybe they might have ended up doing it, but our advice was this house is clearly worth more than you're paying for it. It was just marketed poorly. But have an appraisal all day long, have an appraisal, but it wasn't required. I think they added that on after the fact, and the appraiser did. They said this house is worth more than you're paying for it. So, but yeah, if you don't have a loan, you don't need it. Yes.
Christine, I have a question, please. If on the title it said 3-bedroom and 2 baths, but one of the bedroom has been converted into the dining area. There's been a wall around it that they tore down the wall and annex it to the living room. Is still the closet in there? Is it still 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom?
No, if it's not there, it's not there.
Oh.
If it's not there, it's not there. Yeah. Is public records always correct? No.
No.
What you need to stay away from is unpermitted conversions to bedrooms. So I'm more concerned with when I see more bedrooms than public record says. I'm not so concerned with fewer bedrooms. I'm not concerned with, not as concerned with bedroom that's missing a closet, but it's still showing the accurate bedroom count for me.
Question.
Hold on, Michelle. Yes?
I mean, for example, if your client is okay with it, are you concerned because when they're selling, they don't have issues? Or
They might have an issue, but I mean, if it's a big issue, I'm going to talk to them about it and say, just so you know, this could deter some buyers, or if I think it's a lot of buyers, could deter a lot of buyers. I'm giving them my professional opinion, but especially in a healthy market, especially in an area like Los Angeles, minor issues like that are not the biggest deal, right? I'm not going to pass on something because it's missing a closet. I will build a closet if I want the house.
if there was an additional room which is not permitted, and the buyer still is interested in the house, when she buys the house, is she liable for that?
100%. So the question in the classroom is, if the buyer purchases a home where there's clearly known unpermitted square footage, first off, here's an issue. The appraiser might figure it out. Hopefully they don't, but if they do, the house might not appraise. Okay. Secondly, that could happen when the buyer who now owns it goes to sell it. And third, if the city ever finds out somehow, although you have to be really dumb for the city to find out. If the city ever finds out, they can demand that any current owner, no matter who did it, no matter how long it's been, they can demand that that property owner restore the property to its previous condition. Michelle, did you have a question?
Yes, I think Crystal did also.
Okay.
My question was back to if the property has fallen out of escrow, and how do you ask for previous inspection reports? How do you handle that?
Do you have any previous inspection reports from the past escrow?
Okay.
Very simple. Very simple. Crystal?
Okay, so when you said if it's not there, that third bedroom that they made a dining room, if it's not there, it's not there. You're writing an offer. We're in the seller's market. We want to pull some comps. Should I pull the comps as 2-bedroom or keep it as 3-bedroom? Because I'm finding that we're just getting outbid. People are even paying $100,000 over, even though they like, ugh.
I know. Yeah, no, you're looking for comps that are 2-bedroom. But comps right now, guys, I just taught CMA class, comps that I pull are 30 days old. And what's happening sometimes value is increasing over 10%, but there's such a scarcity. People will just overpay for property at this point sometimes.
That's what I'm going through.
That's what we're all going through, honey.
Yeah, on my
Yep. Offer accepted in multiples. Watch that class. Okay. It's a very helpful class.
What's the name of it?
How to get buyer offer accepted in multiples, or how to make your buyer offer.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Kristen, I have a question.
Yes.
So for the, like the 2-bedroom and the, we were talking about earlier, and the one doesn't have a closet, from a buyer's agent perspective, and maybe not right now in this market, because like we're saying, people are just doing whatever, but like in a typical market, is that something that you would ask for a credit for, find out how much it would be to build in a closet? Is it worth it, or is it just no? Okay.
I can see the issue. So I'd have my buyer make their offer respective, reflecting that consideration for themselves in their offer price. And I would tell my buyer, make sure you build the closet before you ever sell it. Yes.
What's the name of that class and how to get?
How to get your buyer offer accepted in multiples. All right, are we all good, guys?
Kristen, are you wrapping up? Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were you got the question.
Oh yeah, I'm all done.
Okay.
I was just taking questions. I'm hungry. I want to go eat. So if anyone has any inspection and negotiation class related questions, I'll answer those before I go. But if we're going to get off topic like we have been, I'm going to go eat.
So, Chris, my question in relation to the chimney, you referred to
Yeah.
earlier, I think I might have an issue coming up down the line, so specific to that. If the chimney has an issue or there's a previous inspection that showed that the chimney is no longer cold, working functional, but no longer cold, as a selling agent, how would I have?
As a
that?
seller's or buyer's agent?
I'm a selling agent.
Oh, you're going to advertise it as decorative only, fireplace is non-operable, and you should provide those reports. I can guarantee you it's not going to affect your sale price at all. That is the one thing SoCal residents, especially in the seller's market, they don't care at all. I had 15 offers on one like that, and I literally put it in my seller multiple counter offer. Seller will give, here's the inspection report. Seller will give no credits or repairs in relation to.
Even though it wasn't cold, it's functional, but wasn't cold.
Yeah. Yep, as long as it's not gonna hurt anything in the house, potentially hurt anyone, nobody cares. Yep, as long as you market it that way up front, make sure it's on the MLS, you make sure it's disclosed in private remarks, and I would even put it in counter offer. And send over the reports and get that receipt for reports.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Got it.
I posted your YouTube channel.
Thank you, baby, I miss you.
Thank you,
Miss you
Kristen.
too.
Enjoy your lunch.
Joy,
Thanks, bye, John.
take care, bye-bye, have a good day, thank you.
Welcome.